He was enjoying a quiet afternoon in the park, the kind of moment most people take for granted. But then, a figure in uniform approached, eyes sharp, voice cold. "You need to leave." The words cut through the calm, harsh, unprovoked, and final. In that instant, everything shifted. What seemed like a simple encounter became a test of dignity, courage, and human decency. Seconds later, a moment would unfold that no one could predict, a moment that would expose a truth far bigger than one man, one park, one unjust command. Who would truly come out on top? It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind of day where the sun felt warm on your skin and the world seemed just a little calmer. James, an elderly man known in his neighborhood for his gentle smile and quiet dignity, had decided to take a stroll through the local park, his favorite spot to breathe, watch children play, and enjoy a few moments of peace. He had walked this path countless times, nodding politely to familiar faces, the sounds of birds and laughter filling the air around him. For James, life had never been easy, but he carried himself with grace, a steady rhythm in every step. He was a retired teacher, a man who spent decades shaping young minds, and even in retirement, he found joy in small routines, feeding the ducks by the pond, reading under the old oak tree, and greeting neighbors with warmth. Today, he looked forward to the simple comfort of the park, the quiet, the rhythm, the feeling of being at ease. But something felt slightly off, though he couldn't place it. A car lingered near the entrance, its engine idling longer than usual. A shadow moved in the distance, more purposeful than the usual park visitors. James didn't notice. He had no reason to. And yet, without warning, his peaceful routine was about to collide with a moment of authority, prejudice, and tension. A simple walk, a normal morning, was about to become a confrontation that would leave him, and everyone watching, questioning what justice really looks like. James had barely stepped onto the park path when he felt it, the subtle shift in the air, the weight of a gaze that didn't belong. He looked up and saw a police officer, his face tight with authority, striding toward him with purpose. "Excuse me," the officer said, voice sharp, carrying an edge that cut through the morning calm. "You need to leave." James froze. Confused, he glanced around. The park was nearly empty. Children played at a distance, joggers ran along their usual route, and the ducks paddled lazily in the pond. There was no law being broken, no rules being violated. Yet here he was, being told he didn't belong. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. He tried to reason. "I'm just enjoying the morning," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "This is a public park." The officer didn't flinch. He stepped closer, towering over James in a way that made the space feel smaller, the air thicker. "I said, leave." A knot formed in James' stomach. His hands shook, not with anger, but with a realization that this wasn't about rules or law, it was about power. And in that moment, the peaceful park, the familiar path, and the calm morning became a battlefield. Passers-by slowed, glancing curiously, but none approached. Some felt uneasy. Some turned away. Silence amplified the tension, each second stretching endlessly. James started walking, careful to stay calm, hoping compliance would end the encounter. But the officer followed, his footsteps deliberate, echoing with judgment. James' heart raced, every instinct screaming that this was more than a simple request. It was a test of courage, of dignity, of survival. Then, the officer made a sudden gesture, pointing toward a park bench. "Sit. Now." James hesitated. His mind scrambled. Should he argue? Should he comply? The injustice burned in his chest, an invisible fire that made the air feel stifling. Around them, the world continued moving, oblivious to the struggle unfolding in that quiet corner of the park. The tension tightened. A jogger slowed, sensing the confrontation. A dog barked in the distance, and the leaves rustled as if whispering warnings. James' pulse thumped against his ribs. Seconds became an eternity. He realized that one wrong move, one misstep, could escalate this encounter beyond words, beyond reason. And then, without warning, something shifted. A flash of hesitation in the officer's eyes, a small but undeniable sign that this confrontation was far from over and far from predictable. James felt a surge of determination, knowing that whatever happened next would define not just this moment, but the message it sent about respect, humanity, and the quiet battles fought every day. The officer's gaze bore into James, sharp and unyielding. Each step the man took toward him felt heavier than the last, like gravity itself had turned against him. James' hands were at his sides, trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of knowing this wasn't about rules, or laws, or fairness. It was about control. About who had the right to exist freely in this space. "Why are you still here?" the officer snapped, voice cutting like glass. The calm morning had vanished, replaced by tension that wrapped around James like chains. A bird took flight from the oak tree, startled by the sudden energy, and somewhere nearby, a child's laughter stopped mid-giggle. Everything felt suspended, every heartbeat amplified. James swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had never felt so powerless, yet so aware of the injustice pressing down on him. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. A few onlookers had paused at the edge of the path, faces etched with confusion and unease, unsure how, or if, they should intervene. The officer stepped closer, his shadow stretching over James like a dark omen. "I said, leave. Now!" James felt a surge of defiance, tempered by fear. He couldn't vanish from this park without dignity, without standing, in some small way, for every moment he had been told he didn't belong simply because of the color of his skin. His chest tightened, and for a brief heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. And then it happened. The officer's authority wavered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. James sensed the shift instantly, a subtle hesitation, the smallest crack in the armor of intimidation. But just as quickly, the tension snapped back, heavier than ever. Every nerve in James' body screamed that the next seconds could change everything. In that suspended moment, everything hung on a razor's edge. The calm of the park, the warmth of the sun, the rhythm of life, they all stood in stark contrast to the raw, unrelenting confrontation before him. One action, one word, one movement could tip the balance. And in the silence that followed, James realized the unimaginable truth. This moment wasn't just about being asked to leave a park. It was about what it meant to be seen, acknowledged, and respected, or denied all three. James finally stepped away from the confrontation, his legs heavy, his chest still tight from the tension that hadn't fully released. The officer remained silent, retreating only after a long, tense pause, leaving James standing in the middle of the park, shaken but resolute. Around him, life resumed. The birds returned to their branches, the distant laughter of children drifted back into the air, but nothing felt quite the same. The world hadn't stopped, yet he had been forced to reckon with a truth most prefer to ignore, that dignity and humanity can be challenged simply because of the color of one's skin. He walked slowly, each step echoing in his mind. Fear had been real, anger had burned, yet beneath it all, there was a flicker of something stronger, awareness. Awareness that moments like this are not isolated, that countless people face similar indignities every day, and that each act of injustice leaves a mark, invisible yet lasting. James knew he had survived something more than a park encounter. He had witnessed the raw edge of prejudice and power, and he understood that stories like his are not just personal, they are universal. They are reflections of a society still wrestling with fairness, equality, and the question of who is allowed to exist freely in spaces deemed public. As he left the park, he carried more than the memory of fear. He carried a resolve to speak, to share, to make others see. Because silence allows injustice to continue. And for those who watch, the question lingers, how will you respond when you see it? This was more than one man, one park, one unfair command. It was a reminder that the fight for dignity, for respect, for humanity, is ongoing. And it leaves us all with a choice: witness, act, or turn away. What will you choose?